So
All
show
right.
us those cards.
Okay, so the first thing I want to show, and this is all in the directions as well, that you will be able to download if you get the deck, is some representations that we as adults didn't really, unless we're a teacher of younger age children, we really may not know what that representation is all about or even how to use those cards because it wasn't a tool that we were exposed to when we were math students. But TINS frames are probably the most recognizable. But actually, as you start to examine the deck, there's two different sets of TINS frames. A red set and a green set, or the dots are red and green. And so I wanted to explain these even though they really aren't explained in the directions. So the reason there are two sets, I've pulled both of them that are the quantity 7. But typically when we start with younger children, we always arrange them like the red one is arranged. From left to right, top row gets filled, and then the bottom row gets filled from left to right. And the reason we do that is because we want kids to start to recognize if that top row is full, you don't have to count those dots, it's 5. And if both rows are filled, you don't have to count those dots, it's 10, so that they can easily recognize that quantity quickly. But eventually we want to start mixing those dot arrangements up so that kids start to see other arrangements that still indicate 7. So the green card here shows us a 4 on the left side and a 3 on the right side. And so kids might recognize that the 4 looks like the 4 on a dice because it's 2 on top and 2 on bottom. So then they're starting to work with their doubles. So they would immediately know that that's 4. And if they didn't know it was 7 total, they could just know it's 4 and then count on from 4 and go 5, 6, 7 with the 3 dots on the right. So that's why there are two different representations of TINS frames. Then as we go across to that weird word, which is Reckon-Rex, this is a tool that is very valuable for kids to also focus on those quantities of 5 and 10. And so we look at that top row of beads and you notice that there are 5 red beads and then 5 white beads. Well, when they are pushed to the left, or they are represented on that card with all of them pushed to the left, that means we have 10. And since now on the bottom row, we also have the 5 white beads and the 5 red beads and 1 white bead pushed to the left, that's the quantity 16 because you've got the 10 on the top and the 6 on the bottom pushed to the left. So that's 16. The 4 on the right, we don't read those because they're over to the right. Did I make sense out of what a Reckon-Rec is? I mean, I know you know what that is, but does that explanation help, Tammy? Okay.
Yes, I think it does. So the
Okay.
4 on
So
the right are not being used. Whenever you're using a Reckon-Rec, if you had those live and in person, you would start with everything over to the right and you would pull the beads you needed back to the left.
right. And if we had a live and in person one, which it's really easy to make one of those for kids to use even at home, and but that's a whole nother video. We start with them on the right and we actually ask kids to pull them as a quantity. So we would say, if you're going to build 6 and you still need to count it because you don't know it's just 5 beads, 5 red beads and 1 white, then they would count it in position over here, over on their left, and then they would slide all 6 together. So that's what a Reckon-Rec is, and it's a really great tool for our younger children to build those quantities up to 20. Then there's the math path, and the math path is very similar to a number line, although it only starts with the counting numbers of 1 through 10, and actually it can go up to 20, but I just showed it here as the 1 to 10 math path. And so wherever the dot is located, which now that numeral is hidden from view, kids would know that this was the card that represented 7 as well, because that's the dot, that's the numeral that's covered, okay? And the last representation here that's a little unusual is the missing number card. So what this card indicates is what would we put in the blank. So since we see the sequence 5, 6, we know that the next number in sequence is 7. So this is the 7 card on missing numbers, okay? Any questions about any of the rest of that?
No, so just want to point out when, Renee was talking about the green column earlier, she's talking about those cards that have that green outline
Right.
versus you can see the yellow outline, the red outline. She doesn't have a blue outline here posted, but that's what she's talking about. And Renee, tell me about the dogs and cats at the
Oh,
top.
yeah, I'm glad you asked that because it's a little weird that you see dogs and cats. The dogs and cats are actually used in one game that's at the very end of the direction sheets. So it can be done with more with older kids, and it's a lot of fun. But the other reason it had to have dogs and cats is because we need kids to hold the cards correctly. That's to help them orient the top of the card, because on that Rec and Rec card, it matters which way you hold it, because the beads on the right we're not reading, the beads on the left we are reading, so the card has to be held correctly. And so the cats and the dogs always go to the top. Okay?
Gotcha.
Okay,
Okay.
and you
So
notice the suits
let's
at the bottom. I've got hearts
right.
there, I've got squares, I've got stars, and so those are the suits. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is at the very front of both decks, there are wild cards. And again, they are used in certain games, specifically with the crazy bounce and play again, meaning specific things. And then they can be used in other games. Any one of those could be used in other games to represent wild cards. And we're going to have an example of that here in a little bit.